Today we will recap a 2013 film named Grudge. Kindly be exhorted that there may be spoilers ahead. In the initial scene, we are acquainted with George Vickers and Sandra Vickers, who are enthusiastically sitting tight for their child, Jimmy, to get back. The two of them can hardly trust that Jimmy will return home, and his dad offers to cut the yard when he gets back later. Then again, four gangsters are arranging a theft. One of them guarantees them that their next target is on a day-to-day cash run. Then we witness a young lady leave the structure subsequent to pulling out cash from the bank. The hooligans become frightened, put on bunny veils, and seek after the young lady's vehicle. The hoodlums at last stop the young lady toward the stopping point and eliminate her from her vehicle. One gangster looks through the vehicle yet can't track down the cash. And afterward, George, who is driving by, pulls over and speedily shows up at the scene. The hooligans request George to go, and one of them smacks him with a home run stick. Nonetheless, George punches him and tears his head open. Then, at that point, he goes to most of them and beseeches them to leave. One of the individuals waves a blade at George to caution him, yet they at last departure the area subsequent to hearing the police alarm. Before long, the police show up on the scene. In his explanation, George lets the police know that he simply planned to stop him and in no way wanted to kill him. Boss Controller Holland snidely remarks, "You ought to have thought about that prior to striking the play club." George is captured on doubt of murder. Sometime thereafter, the enduring three hooligans approach their chief, Warren, and make sense of that the burglary didn't continue according to plan. At the point when Warren asks about his sibling, he is dazed to learn of his demise. Warren, maddened by his sibling's misfortune, trains the criminals not to return until George is dead. At the point when George gets back home subsequent to getting bail, the hooligans, including Warren, seek after him a thump on his entryway. Two men approach the front entryway and thump, while the other two move around the back of the home. One of them then, at that point, takes steps to attack Sandra. Similar thug who pointed the blade at George lets him know that he shouldn't have behaved like a legend that day while holding him against a wall. The lawbreakers then, at that point, attach the couple to a seat in the carport and pour petroleum on them. Warren burns down the room and kills the couple as they cry. The scene then, at that point, movements to a vehicle, where hero, Jimmy Vickers, a unique tasks cross-examination official, is paying attention to a voice message from his companion Griffin, who relieves him and communicates his distress at the misfortune. Later on, Jimmy visits a bar. He then, at that point, goes to Debs and Terry, the proprietors, for data about his folks' passing. Terry denies having any data, yet Jimmy claims Terry leaves scarcely 50 yards from Jimmy's folks' home, permitting him to hear their shouts. Terry becomes disappointed and advises Jimmy to leave, assuming he is here to create problems. Jimmy, discouraged and offended at what's going on, snatches Terry by the collar and punches him before Debs stops him and requests that Terry let him know what he knows. Terry at long last educates Jimmy concerning calling the local group of firefighters that evening, and he professes to have spotted four of the gangsters. They broke into the house, and he heard Jimmy's dad shout, yet he only watched from the window since he was reluctant about the possibility of mediating. The realities so far are mounting up, and we later see Jimmy in the consuming carport at the house where his folks were supposedly killed. He glances around and recalls his mom and father from an old photo he found in the room. Griffin, Jimmy's police colleague, shows up and educates him that one regarding the neighbors recognized a dark BMW speeding around 11 p.m. on that very night, yet they couldn't peruse the tag. Griffin accepts the gathering engaged with a conflict with George killed him, however the police have little proof against them. Jimmy leaves the carport in tears, advising Griffin to send him CCTV film of the burglary. The following morning, Jimmy visits his folks' burial ground. Morgan, his better half, shows up at chapel while he is there. Morgan and Jimmy were nearly separate from before the calamity. Morgan claims he missed the burial service regardless of getting 5 messages. In any case, when she understands Jimmy is going through a troublesome time, she reassures him by letting him know that he doesn't need to be separated from everyone else and that he is free to visit her level whenever. The next day, Griffin sets up a gathering with Jimmy and uncovers that the dark BMW has a place with Warren, his sibling, who George unintentionally killed that day, as per the request. He then, at that point, furnishes Jimmy with CCTV film from the burglary. Somebody reruns Warren's vehicle as he leaves the exercise center around evening time. He escapes his vehicle, just to find Jimmy holding up inside the vehicle behind him and starts criticizing him. Jimmy, an extraordinary tasks part, rapidly overpowers Warren and takes him out. At the point when Warren awakens, he winds up tied to the front seat, with Jimmy spilling fuel all around his vehicle. Jimmy helps Warren to remember the couple he killed 14 days prior, and Warren emits in rage, demanding he made the best decision. Rather than communicating lament for his activities, Warren makes sense of for Jimmy how he physically attacked Jimmy's mom that evening. Monitoring his feelings, Jimmy requests that the troublemaker name his gangsters in return for letting him go. After Warren records the names, Jimmy begins a cigarette and sets Warren ablaze without leniency. Afterward, he advances toward Morgan's home, however can't represent long inferable from a cut injury. At the point when Morgan stands up, he understands something is off with him. At the point when the lady sees the blood on his garments, she brings him inside and patches the injuries. Notwithstanding the couple's approaching separation, the episode brought them closer, driving Jimmy to go through the night at Morgan's condo. Warren's passing stood out as truly newsworthy the following day. However, everybody knew about his medication selling in criminal history. When Ransack, one of the hooligans, finds out about the mishap, he and Leon rush towards Warren's colleague, Caleb, whom they accept may have killed Warren because of a conflict over rates. The triplet thumps on his entryway and faces him. Be that as it may, Caleb has no clue about what they're referring to. After his sweetheart recovers him, Caleb questions the cases and compromises burglarize and Leon not to get back to his block. Around evening time, Griff visits Jimmy and exhorts him not to rebuff the offenders alone. In any case, dissimilar to Griff, Jimmy accepts that the general public's trade-off framework won't ever shut down these hoodlums, who impact basically every family around. They simply take the assertion and cycle it, though the culprits snicker and spit right in front of them. Afterward, Griff shows up at the crime location, seeing the killing of a man during a furnished burglary. Griff at last sees the shortcomings in the police office. Boss Controller Holland explicitly guarantees that the vendor shouldn't have fought back, ignoring the outfitted burglary and the people in question. At the point when Griff becomes disturbed and guarantees that the man was safeguarding his occupation, Holland advises him to cool it. As per Holland, the man's significant other will guarantee the protection, get an enormous total, and everybody will be fulfilled. In the interim, Jimmy proceeds with the mission and continues on toward the following individual from the group, Ryan. He takes him to an unwanted area, attaches him to a seat, and applies a mouth sleeve all over. Jimmy's quest for retribution consumes him, knowing each of the torments that any exceptional tasks specialist would expose himself to. He empties concrete into Ryan's mouth, making him swallow and stifle to death. The next day, the police find Ryan's body has hardened from the top to the stomach because of the concrete. DCI Holland shows critical interest for the situation and accepts it can possibly prompt a huge advancement. Following that, Terry, the bar proprietor, shows Holland's CCTV film of his foundation, where they can see Jimmy shipping a passed-out man toward the rear of his vehicle. In spite of Deb's recommendation not to show the film, Terry doesn't believe that his bar should torch like George's home. At the point when the police question Morgan about Jimmy, she lies, and Jimmy conceals in her condo. Afterward, Jimmy is from the store, and two cops start to follow him. A vehicle unexpectedly stops similarly as they are prepared to capture him. Two overwhelming men arise and attack the officials, permitting Jimmy to escape with them. Jimmy is stunned to see Colonel Filter leave the vehicle. Jimmy is a pivotal resource for unique tasks, so the Colonel by and by shows up to take him back. He offers Jimmy an additional 48 hours to tidy up his wreck, implying that he should accommodate with the leftover gangsters prior to getting back to his work. Griff, then again, approaches his partner, Joe, the smack chief, and illuminates him that this present circumstance isn't significant. Joe, dubious, inquires as to whether he knows who the executioner is. Griff then, at that point, admits that he is a companion of Jimmy, who experienced the fierce demise of his folks. As Joe endures in his conviction that Jimmy is crazy, Griff declares that Holland isn't an exemption, and he is exclusively zeroing in on this case to get his situation as director, a place that is probably going to pulverize the division because of defilement and disregard. Getting back to Jimmy, he continues with his revenge, secure in the information on the military's supporting and impenetrable to catch. Situated in the strip club, Leon gets an envelope containing the picture of the departed Ryan. Dreading risk, the hooligan escapes from the club, running until Jimmy pushes him down. Subsequent to recuperating cognizance, Leon finds himself bound to the ground, with his lower body attached to the door and his chest area to the vehicle. The secret encompassing Leon's torture just escalates Jimmy's outrage. Accordingly, Jimmy goes for the kill, getting inside the vehicle and hustling it at maximum speed, cutting off Leon and two parts. The following day, Colonel Filter coincidentally finds DCI Holland in an eatery. He demands that Holland hand over every one of the documents police have on Jimmy and pronounces that Jimmy has a place with the military, not him. After hearing this, Holland declines, stating that assuming the colonel authorizes the law autonomously, he ought to confront detainment. Colonel Drain then proceeds to feature Jimmy's boldness by describing an episode from 2009. He guarantees that the military captured the fearmonger who arranged a gigantic assault on the English Central area, yet the psychological oppressor would not uncover any insights regarding it. Jimmy just needed to burn through 10 minutes alone with the fearmonger before he started to spill everything. He guarantees that individuals like Jimmy invite demise as opposed to fear it. At long last, he cautions that Jimmy will polish off these folks and disappear like a phantom. DCI Holland acknowledges the demand and vows to track down Jimmy. The colonel leaves, forewarning Holland that he will deal with extreme repercussion assuming he at any point contacts Jimmy. The following scene portrays the police director and chief of police meeting the military had at short notification. The military chief straightforwardly addresses the matter, stating that confining Jimmy, the focal point of the continuous examination, is unsuitable for any reason. Without uncovering a lot about Jimmy, the authorities clarify for the directors that he means a lot to England's highly confidential organizations. The military order mentioned that higher-ups and police report straightforwardly on the advancement of this examination. Sometime thereafter, a street pharmacist drives the pack's just enduring part, Loot, who was essential for the gathering that killed Jimmy's folks, outside. Jimmy makes him thump on the entryway and utilizes him as a safeguard, yet Loot withdraws the scene later. He kills the posse's leftover street pharmacists, except for Caleb, Warren's colleague. Jimmy attaches him to the seat and mixes a few synthetic compounds in a can, similar synthetic compounds utilized by vendors to make drugs. Jimmy then, at that point, breaks up all of the money in the can prior to pouring the synthetic over the person's head, dissolving him alive. In the meantime, Holland finds Constable Griffin has been giving Jimmy data starting from the start, so he asks him who Jimmy is searching for straightaway. Griffin, then again, will not tell him and solicitation that he stay out of Jimmy's way, however not entirely set in stone to find Jimmy and opposes his administrator's orders. He then finds the last gangster in the clinic who got away from the occurrence the previous evening. The following scene shows the limping man in Jimmy's loft, analyzing letters. Afterward, Jimmy finds him and powers him to drive close to the dock. He causes the man to sit kneeling down with his options limited and takes out a needle, guaranteeing that it is the most deadly spray shower that will copy somebody inside. Ransack then spits on Jimmy and educates him to really take a look at the storage compartment of his vehicle. Incredibly, Ransack has killed Morgan before Jimmy got to him. As Holland's specialized squad shows up on the scene, Jimmy, defeat with wonder and fatigue, discharges his firearm magazine into Loot. Griffin likewise shows up, facing Holland about delivering Loot from the emergency clinic and permitting him to kill Jimmy's better half. Holland claims he let him go so the person could lead him to Jimmy, yet he had no clue he would kill his significant other. Joe, the smack skipper, sees Holland's world and orders his crew to remain down, leaving Holland alarmed. They let a messed-up Jimmy leave the scene, while Holland attempted to stop him alone. Prior to withdrawing, Jimmy strikes Holland in the face, making him at last stop. The film deduces in a rear entryway with an irregular lady putting out junk. Two outsiders meddle and snatch her as she argues for help. Jimmy shows up at the opposite finish of the rear entryway. The hooligans defy Jimmy and beseech him to leave, and Jimmy's cry blurs into obscurity with a terrible grin. Gratitude for watching. In the event that you are new, remember to buy in for a greater amount of these recaps. Until sometime later, have a decent day.